My name is Theodora Bishop. At 68, I had paid the price for the life I lived, and I had paid it gladly. The currency was my own heart, spent over and over on the boy I raised. I gave my grandson Malik the world after his own fell apart. I sacrificed my peace, my pension, and the quiet autumn of my life to build a future for him from the wreckage of his past. For Thanksgiving, he thanked me by setting up a camera, pointing it at my face, and live streaming my lonely dinner to the entire world with the title, "Watch Granny Eat Alone, lol." He thought his own grandmother was a joke, a meme, a stepping stone for his pathetic online ambitions, but he forgot one very important thing about the woman who fed him, housed him, and held him up his entire life. He forgot I owned the house, and I was about to remind him before I begin, thank you for being here, for being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, you are in the right place. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now, let me tell you what that boy did to me. My home was my sanctuary, a small brick-faced house on a street lined with mature oaks in the University City neighborhood of Charlotte, North Carolina. Every corner held a memory. The worn spot on the armchair where my late husband, Samuel, used to sit. The faint pencil mark on the kitchen doorframe measuring my daughter Nia's height at age 6. Peace was my most prized possession. Earned over a 40-year career as a hospital administrator, a life of ordered days and quiet, steady competence. I tended my roses, I read my novels. It was a simple life, a good life. That peace, however, had become a commodity I was constantly spending. The biggest storm of my life had been the loss of Nia. Taken by a sickness that came on fast and fierce 15 years ago, she left behind a hole in my heart and a 7-year-old boy named Malik. His father, a man of fleeting charms and no character, lasted 6 more months before he packed a bag and disappeared, leaving Malik on my doorstep with a scrawled note and the scent of stale regret. From that day forward, Malik was my reason. He was Nia's legacy. He was my blood. Raising him was not a choice. It was a promise I had made to my daughter in the sterile quiet of a hospital room. And I kept that promise. Every spare dollar from my pension, every ounce of my energy was poured into that boy. College wasn't for him, he'd said after graduating high school with a shrug. He was going to be a content creator, a new kind of star for a new kind of world. It was a language of clicks and views I didn't understand, but I supported him. 2 years ago, that support had demanded its steepest price yet. Malik had presented me with a detailed list of equipment, a startup package for his career. The total was a number so large it made me feel dizzy. My retirement dreams had always included travel, maybe a cruise to Alaska, a trip to see the red rocks of Sedona. Those dreams were funded by a small rental property I owned in Noda, the Arts District, a duplex I had bought with Samuel decades ago. It was my safety net, my ticket to the world. I sold it. The memory is still sharp, a painful splinter in my mind. I remember having to tell the tenants, a young couple who had lived there for 5 years, that they had to leave. The woman, a teacher, had tears in her eyes, but Mrs. Bishop, she'd said, "We love this place. We thought we'd be here for years." I felt a wave of guilt so strong it almost buckled my knees. I was displacing this good, responsible family for a grandson who had yet to prove he could hold down a part-time job. Then came the meeting with the slick, fast-talking realtor in his uptown office. I felt small and out of my depth as he threw around terms like escrow and capital gains, but I pushed through, my love for Malik a shield against my own better judgment. I signed the papers, the view of the city's skyline blurred by my unshed tears. The money, a significant sum, vanished from my account and reappeared in Malik's in the form of a top-of-the-line computer, 3 different cameras, and a microphone that looked like something from a professional recording studio. The sacrifice was my own quiet secret, a foundation stone laid for the life he was meant to build. Lately, however, the ground beneath my feet felt unsteady. The boy I had raised was being replaced by a stranger, a sullen, distracted young man who saw me not as his grandmother, but as his landlady and his bank. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving was the first tremor. I met my best friend, Beatrice, for coffee at the famous toastery near the university. "Theo, honey, you look tired," she said, her voice warm but her eyes sharp and knowing as she stirred her coffee. worn to a thread. Just getting ready for the holiday, B, I lied, trying to inject some cheer into my voice. Just the two of you again this year? She asked gently. Is that boy helping you at all, or is he still locked in that room? She leaned forward. I saw him last week at South Park Mall. He was coming out of the Nike store with a big bag. Those sneakers he wears cost more than my good winter coat. He's not playing games, Beatrice. He's working, I snapped, my defensiveness a shield for my own rising doubts. He has an image to maintain for his followers. It's part of the business, an investment. Beatrice just looked at me, her expression a mixture of love and pity. I know, honey, she said, her tone softening. I just worry about you. You deserve to enjoy your retirement, not to be funding a grown man's shoe collection. Her words, meant to be kind, felt like an accusation. I saw the truth reflected in her concern. I was a 68-year-old woman depleting her life savings to fund the ambitions of a man who did not so much as offer to carry in the groceries. I ended our coffee date quickly, my heart heavy with a truth I refused to acknowledge. I pushed the feeling down and focused on the holiday. I would cook. I would create a memory of warmth and gratitude so powerful it would have to break through his shell. I went to the Harris Teeter and filled my cart. A 20-pound turkey, a honey-glazed ham, the ingredients for macaroni and cheese with 3 kinds of cheese, Gouda, sharp cheddar, and Monterey Jack, the way he loved it. Collard greens, sweet potatoes for the pie, cranberries for the sauce. My back ached and my feet were swollen as I unloaded the bags, but my heart was full of a desperate, determined love. I was setting a stage. I was building a fortress of tradition and affection around us. I had no idea I was actually just building my own scaffold. Thanksgiving Day arrived on a current of crisp, cold air. The house, however, was a bubble of warmth and joy. The scent of roasting turkey, of butter and sage and love permeated every room. By 3 o'clock, the feast was ready. I stood back and surveyed the dining room table. It was a picture of perfection, a Rockwell painting come to life. I had used my best china, the Lenox plates with the delicate gold rims that I had received as a wedding gift and used only for the most special of occasions. I'd polished the silverware until it gleamed. 2 linen napkins were folded neatly into their silver rings. 2 tall candles stood in their crystal holders, their flames flickering gently, casting a soft, warm glow over the scene. It was a feast for a king, a testament to a grandmother's boundless love. Malik, I called out, my voice full of cheerful anticipation. Dinner's ready, baby. I heard his bedroom door open, and a few moments later, he emerged. He wasn't looking at the magnificent spread on the table. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on the phone in his hand, which was already mounted on a small black tripod. In his other hand, he carried a portable circular light ring. Oh, Nana, looks great, he said, his voice distracted. He walked over to the table and, to my confusion, began setting up his equipment on the polished wood surface directly across from my seat. He angled the phone, adjusted the light ring until it cast a flat, clinical glare over my carefully arranged place setting and fiddled with the settings on his screen.
What are you doing, honey? I asked, a small knot of confusion tightening in my stomach. Just want to capture this moment for us, Nana, he said, flashing a quick, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. You look beautiful. The table looks amazing. I just want to get a little video. I relaxed. A video. Of course, he was a content creator. This is what he did. I felt a small surge of pride. Maybe he did appreciate it after all. All right, then, I said, smoothing my dress as I sat down. Let me just get the turkey carved. No, you sit down first, he insisted, a strange urgency in his tone. Just start with your salad. I want to get the lighting right on you before I bring the bird over. I'll be right back. He gave me a thumbs up and then walked away. But he didn't go to the kitchen. He went into the living room where the booming sounds of the Carolina Panthers football game were already filling the air. He flopped onto the sofa and I saw him pick up another phone from the coffee table. My confusion curdled into a chilling unease. From my seat at the head of the table, I could see the screen of the phone he had left behind. It was on. A steady red light glowed in the corner. And on the screen, I saw my own face, staring back at me in perfect, high-definition clarity. I looked small and old under the harsh glare of the ring light. Beneath my image, a stream of comments began to scroll by, a waterfall of tiny, anonymous words. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a private video. This was live. He had turned me into a show. The full, soul-crushing horror of it didn't hit me until I heard his voice from the other room. It wasn't his normal voice. It was his loud, performative streamer voice, full of false energy and forced laughter. What's up? What's up, stream team? Welcome back to the Thanksgiving Day special. I couldn't move. I sat frozen, a prisoner in my own dining room, as he continued. Yeah, that's my Nana. She goes all out, right? A real one. We're just waiting for the game to come back from commercial. Then we'll get this feast started. Then I heard another sound, a cheerful electronic cha-ching. Yo, shout out to Clout Chaser 99, Malik yelled, his voice bright with glee. Thanks for the $10. Yeah, Nana's a real trooper, Lau. She doesn't even know she's famous right now. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just showing me eating alone. He was actively monetizing my humiliation in real time. Each donation, each laughing emoji that scrolled past on the screen was a transaction fueled by my own degradation. The feast I had cooked with such love was not a meal. It was a prop. The dining room was not a sanctuary. It was a stage, and I, Theodora Bishop, was the clown. The title of the stream, I would later learn, was elegantly simple in its cruelty. Watch Granny eat alone. LOL, I was a joke. And he was collecting the admission fee. To sit in a place of honor is to be seen. To be made a spectacle is to be rendered an object. For the next 10 minutes, which stretched into an eternity, I learned the brutal meaning of that truth. I sat paralyzed at the head of my beautifully set table, a ghost at my own feast, while the world watched and laughed. The scent of the turkey and the sweet potato pie, which had filled me with such pride moments before, now seemed cloying and sickening. It was the smell of my own foolishness. My mind, a frantic whirl of disbelief and pain, struggled to catch up. This was Malik, my Malik, the little boy I had held in my arms after his mother's funeral, promising him he would never be alone. The boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose report cards I had praised, whose future I had funded with the very bricks and mortar of my own. How could that boy do this? The answer was right there. In the casual cruelty of his voice echoing from the living room, that boy was gone. In his place was this cold, calculating stranger who saw his own grandmother not as a person, but as content. The love I had poured into him my entire life had been returned with this singular, soul-crushing act of contempt. Then something shifted. In the depths of my despair, a flood of memories washed over me, a montage of the daughter I had raised. I saw Nia in middle school stepping between a bully and a smaller girl, her chin held high. I saw her at 20, beaming with pride from the front row when I received a promotion at the hospital. I saw her just a year before she got sick, showing up at our elderly neighbor's door with a pot of homemade chicken soup just because. My daughter's kindness, her innate empathy, her simple recognition of another person's dignity was a light that had never dimmed. The stark, brutal contrast between the daughter I had raised and the grandson I had enabled was the spark. It was the flicker of light in the profound darkness of my humiliation. This act wasn't just a betrayal of me, it was a betrayal of Nia's memory. My enabling of him, my constant sacrifice hadn't honored my daughter's legacy. It had funded its desecration. My eyes, blurred with tears, focused on the phone screen across the table. I squinted, trying to read the scrolling comments through the haze of my pain. Most were a meaningless jumble of laughing emojis and cruel slang. But then one comment snagged my attention. It was longer than the others, written in plain, simple English. My grandma raised me after my mom died too. I would give anything to have one more Thanksgiving with her. You're a disgrace. The words pierced through my grief like a shard of ice. My grandma raised me after my mom died too. This stranger, this anonymous person out in the ether, saw the truth of my life. They saw the love, the sacrifice, and the profound ugliness of Malik's betrayal. They saw me. And in that moment, the grief that had been drowning me began to burn away, replaced by something else. Something hard and cold and clear. It was anger. A righteous, diamond-hard fury. They thought they buried me. They didn't know it was a seed. My spine, which had been slumped in defeat, straightened. The weariness in my bones was replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated resolve. I was Theodora Bishop. I had managed hospital departments with multi-million-dollar budgets. I had navigated complex union negotiations. I would not be erased by a callous boy with a smartphone. My mind, once clouded with pain, was now a machine of cold, clear logic. A plan, brilliant and devastating in its simplicity, began to form. They had used their technology to humiliate me. I would use my own resources, my own intelligence to reclaim my story. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I stood up. My chair scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound loud in the suddenly silent house. Malik must have heard it because he called out from the living room, "You okay, Nana? The game's almost over." I did not answer. Head held high, I walked out of the dining room. I ignored the feast. I ignored the phone that was still broadcasting my empty chair to the world. I walked down the hallway to the small nook where the internet router sat on a shelf, its little green lights blinking with mindless obedience. It was the source of his power, the portal through which he had invited the world to mock me. My fingers closed around the power cord. With a single, decisive pull, I yanked it from the wall. The blinking green lights died instantly. I had severed his connection. I had cut the cord. And in the profound, blessed silence that followed, I knew I was just getting started. The next morning, the house was a war zone of Malik's making. He stomped through the halls, a thundercloud of adolescent fury. "The Wi-Fi is down. I can't connect. Did you call the cable company? My stream last night got cut off mid-sentence. Do you know how unprofessional that looks?" I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, a portrait of serene indifference. "I'm sure it was very inconvenient for you," I said, my voice as calm and cool as the morning air. His face, usually pale from being indoors, was flushed with rage. "Inconvenient? Nana, this is my job. My followers are waiting for an update. I need to get online." "That sounds like a personal problem," I replied, taking another slow sip. He stared at me, his mouth agape, the gears in his head visibly grinding as he tried to process this new, uncooperative version of his grandmother. He saw the Wi-Fi outage as a technical issue. He had no idea it was a declaration of war. While he fumed and paced, my own army was assembling. It was an army of one, me, and my strategy was being executed with the methodical precision of a seasoned administrator. After he stormed back to his room to sulk, I went to my bank. I sat across the desk from a young personal banker at the local Wells Fargo branch, a woman with kind eyes who listened patiently as I explained my needs. "I need to protect my assets," I stated, my voice clear and firm. I had her help me open a new checking account solely in my name. I arranged for my pension deposits to be rerouted there immediately. I transferred the bulk of my savings, leaving only a pittance in the joint account Malik had access to for emergencies. It was a quiet, clinical severing of the financial cord. From the bank, I went to my home office. I turned on my old, reliable desktop computer. My first task was research. I opened a web browser and typed Mecklenburg County Eviction Statute, tenant at will. The law, I discovered, was quite clear. I navigated to the NC Court's government website, found the complaint in summary ejection form, and printed 2 copies, filling them out in neat block letters. The reason for eviction: owner wishes to reclaim property for personal use. It was simple, legal. My next move was tactical. I waited until Malik left in a huff, then went into his bedroom. In the middle of the disaster of clothes and empty energy drink cans was his prized possession, the Procam 4K camera. I found the original box and the receipt from Ballantine Photo. An hour later, I was standing at their counter. The young man behind it was skeptical about the 2-year-old receipt. "Ma'am, our return policy is 30 days, he said politely. "I understand that," I said, my voice firm but pleasant. "I am not asking for a cash refund. I am the original purchaser of this item. I would like to return it for store credit." He called his manager. There was a hushed conversation. They looked at me, a determined 68-year-old woman in her Sunday best, holding a $4,000 camera. 10 minutes later, I walked out with a gift card for the full purchase price. It felt like I had reclaimed a piece of my soul. When I returned home, I began the final phase of my operation. I went back into Malik's room with a stack of empty cardboard boxes. One by one, I began to pack up his career, the glowing keyboard, the microphone, the headphones. Each item I touched was a ghost of a sacrifice. This microphone, that was the month I put off getting the roof repaired. These LED light panels, that was the dental implant I decided I could live without. This ergonomic gaming chair, that was the dream of seeing the Alaskan glaciers melting away, just like my savings. It was a painful, heartbreaking process, but with each item I placed in a box, I felt lighter. I was not just packing up his things, I was unpacking the burden of my own misplaced devotion. By the time he returned that afternoon, his room was still a mess of his own making, but the expensive high-tech core of it was gone. 6 neatly sealed cardboard boxes were stacked against the wall, and on his keyboard, where his fingers would land to type his next entitled demand, sat the official, legally binding 30-day notice to vacate. Malik returned just after 5 o'clock, slamming the front door with his customary lack of consideration. He stomped down the hall to his room, and a moment later, a roar of pure animal fury echoed through the house. What is this? Where's my stuff? He stormed into the kitchen, his face a grotesque mask of rage and disbelief. He was waving the eviction notice in his hand like a weapon. What is the meaning of this? You can't kick me out. This is my home. It is my home, Malik, I said, my voice a quiet counterpoint to his hysteria. I was standing by the sink, washing the few dishes from my solitary lunch, my hands steady. And you have 30 days to find a new one. My gear, where is my gear? He screamed, his eyes wild as he scanned the living room, as if his precious equipment might have magically reappeared. Your belongings are packed in the boxes in your room, I informed him calmly. Everything that you purchased with your own money is there. His eyes narrowed. A flicker of cold dread seemed to douse his hot anger. My own money? What about my camera, my ProCam 4K? Ah, yes, I said, turning from the sink to face him fully. That was purchased with my money, and I have returned it. The color drained from his face. The camera was the heart of his operation. It was his status symbol, the engine of his ambition. Without it, he was just another loudmouth with a laptop. Returned it? You can't do that. I need that. That's my career. No, Malik, I said, my voice laced with a steel he had never heard before. That was my retirement, and I've decided I want it back. This was the moment his panic truly set in. His power, which he had wielded with such arrogance, was entirely dependent on my home, my utilities, my pension. He had built his little online kingdom on my foundation, and I was now systematically dismantling it, brick by brick. His anger collapsed into a desperate, pathetic attempt at manipulation. I can't believe you're doing this to me, he whimpered, his eyes welling with crocodile tears. After everything, what would my mother think? The mention of Nia was a low blow, a desperate gambit, and it failed spectacularly. A year ago, it would have shattered me. Now, it solidified my resolve into something unbreakable. Do not speak her name, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You are not fit to invoke her memory. My daughter, your mother, was the kindest, most compassionate soul I have ever known. She would be horrified by the man you have become. She would be ashamed of what you did to me in this house on Thanksgiving Day. I am not doing this to you, Malik. I am doing this for her. My words hit him with the force of a physical slap. He recoiled, speechless. He had played his last card, and it was a loser. The fight went out of him, replaced by the frantic, scurrying energy of a cornered rat. He pulled out his phone and began frantically texting, then calling. From my place in the kitchen, I was granted a front row seat to the collapse of his illusory social circle. Yo, Mike, it's Malik. Yeah, listen, my Nana's tripping. I need a place to crash for a while. Oh, right, your mom. Okay, cool. No, it's fine. He called another number. Dion, what's up, bro? Hey, you got a spare room? My grandma is kicking me out. What do you mean? What did I do? Nothing. The stream? Bro, that was a joke. It wasn't a big deal. Hello, Dion. One by one, his online friends, the sycophants who had cheered on his cruelty, revealed themselves to be nothing more than digital ghosts. They offered no help, no sanctuary. His social capital, he was discovering, was non-transferable to the real world. It was worthless without my Wi-Fi signal. He slumped onto the sofa, the eviction notice crumpled in his fist, a look of utter desolate defeat on his face. He was no longer a content creator. He was just an unemployed, entitled young man with 30 days of notice and nowhere to go. The king of a digital castle had just been rendered homeless, and I, his first and most loyal subject, had led the coup. The next 30 days were a masterclass in quiet endurance. Malik treated my home like a hostile hotel, a sullen, silent presence who emerged from his room only to grab food before retreating back into his digital cave. About a week before his time was up, I came into the kitchen to find a sad-looking bouquet of grocery store carnations and a glass on the counter. Next to it was a note scrawled on a napkin. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt at manipulation. I looked at the wilting flowers and the hollow words and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even a flicker of the old familiar love. I picked up the glass, walked to the trash can, and dumped the entire sorry display inside. I was immune to his poison now. My own community, my real community, rallied around me. The Sunday after the confrontation, I confessed the whole sordid story to Beatrice over coffee after church service. Her face hardened with a fierce, protective anger on my behalf. "That boy," she said, her voice low and tight with fury. "Theodora, you did the right thing. The only thing." The next evening, she showed up at my door with a hot casserole dish. "You are not eating alone tonight," she said, marching past me into the kitchen. My church friends surrounded me with quiet, steady support. They reminded me that my world was so much bigger than the one ungrateful boy down the hall. On the 30th day, I woke with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I watched from my living room window as a beat-up Honda Civic pulled into my driveway. It was Dion, apparently the only one willing to help. I watched as Malik loaded his 6 cardboard boxes and 2 duffel bags of clothes into the car. He never once looked at the house. As he got into the passenger seat, he pulled out his phone and pointed it at my front door, likely for one last pathetic video. I simply stepped away from the window, denying him even the satisfaction of a reaction. A few moments later, the car drove away. An hour later, a locksmith was changing the locks on my doors. As he worked, my phone buzzed. It was Malik. I looked at his name, then silenced the call. It buzzed again, a text message. I deleted it without reading it. My silence was my final, most powerful statement. The Bank of Theodora was officially, permanently closed. That afternoon, I drove to the Ballantine photo store. I used the store credit to buy a good, solid Nikon camera and a macro lens. Then I drove to Pike Nurseries, a wonderland of green and growing things. With the money I was no longer spending on Malik's internet bill or his endless list of wants, I bought the most magnificent Japanese maple I had ever seen, its leaves a fiery, defiant red. I spent the rest of the afternoon planting it in my front yard. My back ached and my hands were caked with dirt, but it was a good, clean ache. It was the feeling of building something for myself. A year has passed. It is Thanksgiving Day again. The silence in my house is no longer lonely. It is serene. The air smells of turkey and pie, but this year it is a shared effort. Beatrice is here, pulling her famous sweet potato casserole from my oven. 2 other friends from my photography club are laughing at the kitchen table, arranging a centerpiece of autumn flowers. My new hobby has become my passion. My photo of a bee dusted with yellow pollen won 2nd place in a community contest. I have it framed on my mantelpiece. We sit down at the same dining room table, but this year, every seat is filled. The room is not lit by the cold glare of a ring light, but by the warm glow of the candles and the even warmer glow of genuine friendship. We raise our glasses. To the Theodora, Beatrice says, her eyes shining, and to new traditions, the sound of our shared laughter is the most beautiful music I have ever heard. The Japanese maple in my yard is thriving, its branches reaching towards the sun. Sometimes, when I look at it, I think of Malik. I hope he finds his way. I hope he learns that character is built not by the audience you command, but by the kindness you show when no one is watching. But his journey is his own now. My legacy is not in the success of a grandson who scorned me, but in the quiet strength I found in my darkest hour. It is in the knowledge that I faced the ultimate disrespect and answered not with rage, but with intelligence, grace, and the devastating power of a perfectly executed plan. My story ends here, in my home surrounded by love, with the sun warming my face and the click of my camera shutter, capturing a small, beautiful piece of a world that is, finally, all my own.